I stared at my phone screen and my heart sank. Crack lines spread across every inch of the display like spider webs. Not a single corner left untouched. What could I do? The device still worked and I had no money for a replacement. My name is Aiden, and I'm probably the most invisible Omega at Greenwood University. Stefan suddenly grabbed my wrist and yanked the phone from my hand before I could react. Everyone, check this out. Look at Aiden's antique collection. Stefan held the phone high above his head like a trophy. The entire cafeteria erupted in laughter. Heat flooded my cheeks, but I kept my head down. Being an Omega meant I knew fighting back against any Alpha would only multiply my humiliation. Stefan had been targeting me for months now, probably because I stayed quiet and made an easy victim. Dude, donate that thing to a museum, Garrett said, Stefan's closest friend. They started tossing my phone back and forth like it was some kind of game ball. My chest ached watching them, but I remained frozen in place. This wasn't the first time. For 3 months now, these two had made me their primary target, and I just endured everything silently, hoping each incident would be the last. Suddenly a deep voice cut through the chaos. Stop! The cafeteria fell completely silent. Jackson Cross had entered the room. The most powerful Alpha at our university, son of the city's mayor. Stefan immediately threw the phone in my direction and walked away with his friend without another word. Jackson's eyes landed on me and my breathing became difficult. He had noticed me for the first time. Truly noticed me. Are you all right? He asked without any particular emotion, though his voice carried an undeniable firmness. Yes. I'm fine, I stammered. My voice came out so weak I doubted he even heard me. He looked at my damaged phone once, then at me and walked away without saying anything else. But as he left, he glanced back at me with a lingering stare, as if considering something important. Stefan shot me a venomous look as he exited the cafeteria. You won't forget this, Aiden. Your hero won't always be there to save you. I knew he was right. Tomorrow would probably bring worse consequences. But at that moment, only one face occupied my mind. Jackson Cross. The thought terrified me because an Omega like me had no business hoping for help from someone like Jackson Cross. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I couldn't concentrate in any of my classes. My professor called on me twice during literature class, and both times I had no idea what question she had asked. The other students whispered and giggled, clearly aware of what had happened in the cafeteria. News traveled fast in our university, especially when it involved humiliation. After my last class ended, I walked to the small campus bookstore where I worked part-time. The owner, Mrs. Chen, was an older beta woman who had always been kind to me. She took one look at my face and frowned. Rough day? She asked gently while organizing some textbooks on the counter. Something like that, I replied, not wanting to elaborate. Talking about it would only make me feel worse. She studied me for a moment, then reached under the counter and pulled out a chocolate bar. Here? Chocolate helps everything. She smiled warmly and I couldn't help but return a small smile despite my terrible mood. I worked my 3-hour shift scanning books and helping students find materials they needed. The repetitive tasks gave me something to focus on besides my anxiety about what Stefan might do next. When my shift finally ended, I grabbed my backpack and headed toward the bus stop. The campus looked beautiful in the early evening light. Golden sunset rays painted the old brick buildings in warm tones, and students laughed together in small groups scattered across the lawn. I wondered what it felt like to belong somewhere like that, to have friends who cared about you, to walk without constantly looking over your shoulder. My apartment was a 30-minute bus ride away in the older part of town. The building had seen better days, with peeling paint and a lobby that always smelled faintly of mildew, but the rent fit my tight budget. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my tiny studio and unlocked the door. The space was small but mine. A bed in one corner, a desk with my laptop, a mini kitchenette, and a bathroom barely large enough to turn around in. I dropped my bag on the floor and collapsed onto my bed, staring at the ceiling. My phone sat on the nightstand, screen cracked beyond repair but somehow still functional. I picked it up and examined the damage more closely. The phone had been a gift from my aunt 2 years ago. Before she passed away, she had saved up for months to buy it for my birthday, knowing I needed one for school. Seeing it destroyed today felt like losing a piece of her all over again. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I heated up some instant noodles and ate them while reviewing my homework assignments. An essay due Friday, a chemistry quiz on Monday, and a group project presentation next week. Normal student problems that felt overwhelming when combined with everything else. As I brushed my teeth before bed, I caught my reflection in the small bathroom mirror. I looked tired, dark circles shadowed my eyes, and my face seemed paler than usual. Being an omega meant I naturally appeared more delicate than alphas or betas. But lately I looked almost fragile. I crawled into bed and pulled the thin blanket up to my chin. Tomorrow would come whether I was ready or not. Stefan's threat echoed in my mind. What would he do next? And why had Jackson intervened? That question bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Sleep came slowly, filled with restless dreams of breaking phones and watching eyes. When I arrived at the library the next morning, my chest still felt heavy from yesterday's humiliation. I opened my locker, and as the door swung wide, my breath caught in my throat. A brand new phone sat inside, the latest model, sleek and shining under the fluorescent lights. My hands trembled as I reached for it. No note accompanied the device. No name, just a small card with printed words. For emergencies. Stay safe. Who could have done this? Stefan? Absolutely not. He wanted to destroy my life, not improve it. Garrett? Even less likely. Jackson? But why would he? He had only intervened once. I lifted the phone carefully and placed it in my bag like it was made of glass. My heart pounded with emotions I couldn't identify, gratitude mixed with fear. Maybe this was someone's cruel joke, or perhaps, after class, as I walked through the main corridor, Jackson stood near the water fountain. He appeared focused on his phone, but the moment I came into view, he looked up and made direct eye contact. I quickly averted my gaze and tried to keep walking, but my heartbeat thundered so loudly I felt certain everyone could hear it. Adin, he called my name. For the first time ever, he spoke it like he had known it all along, like saying my name was the most natural thing in the world. My feet stopped moving. Yes? I turned to face him, fighting to keep my voice steady. Did you make it home safely last night? He asked in such a casual tone, as if we were old friends, as if checking on me was perfectly normal for him. Yes. Thank you for yesterday, I managed to say, uncertain whether expressing gratitude was appropriate. He gave a slight nod and continued down the hallway. That was all. Yet this brief interaction set my heart racing. Did this mean he genuinely cared? Or was I reading too much into a simple question? That evening in my small apartment, I examined the new phone more closely. It contained only emergency contacts and a few basic applications. Then a notification appeared. Use this when you need help. The letter J clearly stood for Jackson. Warmth spread through my chest, and for the first time I allowed myself to believe that maybe someone actually saw me. But then Stefan's words from yesterday returned. Your hero won't always be there to save you. I set the phone aside and tried to suppress my doubts. The next day proceeded normally. I attended my morning biology class, where Professor Williams droned on about cellular mitosis. My mind wandered constantly. I kept touching my bag to make sure the new phone was still there, as if it might vanish like a dream. During lunch, I sat alone at my usual corner table in the cafeteria. I had brought a sandwich from home to save money. Other students filled the room with their conversations and laughter, creating a wall of sound that somehow made me feel even more isolated. I was part of this university but separate from it, like watching life through a window. That's when I noticed her, a girl from my chemistry class named Maya. She was a beta, always friendly to everyone. She walked past my table, then stopped and backtracked. Hey Aiden. Right? She said with a genuine smile. Yes. I replied, surprised she knew my name. I heard what happened yesterday with Stefan. That was really unfair. Are you okay? Her concerns seemed authentic, not the fake sympathy people sometimes offered. I'm managing, I said, not wanting to go into details. Well, if you ever want to sit with my friends and me, you're welcome. Nobody should eat alone. She gestured toward a table where 3 other students sat chatting animatedly. Thank you. I appreciate that, I said, though I knew I probably wouldn't take her up on the offer. Getting close to people meant risking more pain when they inevitably left or turned against me. She smiled once more and rejoined her friends. The simple kindness lifted my spirits slightly. reminding me that not everyone at Greenwood University was cruel. After lunch, I headed to the campus courtyard to study between classes. The weather was pleasant, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of the flowering trees planted around the quad. I found an empty bench and pulled out my chemistry textbook. I had been reading for maybe 20 minutes when a shadow fell across my page. I looked up to find Jackson standing there blocking the sunlight. My pulse immediately quickened. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, though his tone suggested it wasn't really a question. "Of course not," I said, moving my bag to make room. He sat down, maintaining a respectful distance but close enough that I could catch his scent. Something woodsy and clean that made my omega instincts respond in ways I tried to ignore. We sat in silence for a moment. I pretended to read my textbook, but I couldn't process a single word. "Chemistry," he finally said, glancing at my book. "Yes. We have a quiz next week," I replied, keeping my eyes on the page. "That subject nearly killed me last year," he said with a slight laugh. "If you ever need help, let me know. I eventually figured it out." "Thank you," I said quietly, still not quite believing this conversation was happening. He stood up after another minute. "Take care, Aiden." Then he walked away, leaving me completely confused and strangely hopeful. That evening, I couldn't stop thinking about our interactions. Why was Jackson Cross, of all people, paying attention to me? He could have anyone he wanted. Alphas, betas, or omegas from wealthy families who actually fit into his world. I was nobody, a scholarship student barely scraping by. I picked up the new phone and stared at the message again. "Use this when you need help. Jay." The fact that he had given me this expensive device, that he kept checking on me, that he seemed genuinely care, it all felt too good to be true. My rational mind warned me to be cautious. People didn't do things without reasons. What could Jackson possibly want from me? But a small voice in my heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, his intentions were pure. Maybe he saw something in me that others missed. I fell asleep that night with the phone charging beside my bed, feeling slightly less alone than I had in months. 2 days passed without incident, which felt unusual for me. Stefan and Garrett kept their distance, and I started wondering if perhaps things would finally improve. How wrong I was. Thursday evening, as I exited my final class, Stefan intercepted me in the hallway. "Aiden, come outside. We need to talk." His voice held no mockery this time, just a cold command. My heart began pounding. This wasn't good. I followed because my omega instincts wouldn't let me ignore an alpha's direct order. He led me to the empty parking lot behind campus. Darkness had already fallen, and Garrett waited there, leaning against a car. Students avoided this area. I suddenly understood. This was a trap. "Heard you got yourself a new phone," Stefan said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Pretty expensive looking. Who's your generous benefactor?" "I don't know what you mean," I said, though my voice shook. It was a lie, but I refused to drag Jackson into this mess. Garrett grabbed my collar and shoved me against the brick wall. My head struck the hard surface, and pain exploded behind my eyes. "Don't lie to us, Omega. We've seen you with that fancy new device. Got yourself a sugar daddy or something." His alpha scent overwhelmed my senses, and my omega instincts screamed at me to submit. Stefan reached into my bag and pulled out the new phone. I tried to stop him, but Garrett tightened his grip, making movement impossible. "Look at this. iPhone. Latest model." Stefan examined it carefully, then suddenly threw it to the ground with force. The screen shattered, pieces scattering across the pavement. My heart broke watching it. The phone someone had given me with such care was now destroyed. "Consider this a warning, Aiden. Jackson Cross or anyone else can't protect you forever. Understand?" Stefan's words dripped with threat. Both of them laughed as they walked away, leaving me alone in the darkness. I sat on the cold pavement, gathering the phone's broken pieces. Tears filled my eyes, but I refused to cry. Crying never changed anything. This time, though, humiliation wasn't my primary emotion. Guilt consumed me. I had failed to protect Jackson's kindness. When I finally made it home, I retrieved my old broken phone. Miraculously, it still functioned. I typed a message to the unknown number that was probably Jackson's. "I'm sorry. The moan broke. Thank you for everything." No reply came that night. Maybe Jackson had realized I didn't deserve his kindness. Maybe he would keep his distance now. I spent the next day in a fog of anxiety and shame. Every time I saw someone looking at me, I wondered if they had heard about the parking lot incidents. Stefan and Garrett seemed to be everywhere, their presence a constant reminder of my powerlessness. In literature class, Professor Martinez assigned us to read a passage aloud. When my turn came, I stumbled over the words, my voice barely audible. Some students snickered. I wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never return. After class, I went straight to the library instead of the cafeteria. Food didn't appeal to me anyway. I found a secluded corner on the third floor where nobody usually went and tried to study. The words on the page blurred together as my mind replayed yesterday's events over and over. Around 3 in the afternoon, my old phone buzzed. A text message appeared from an unknown number. Meet me at the north entrance. My stomach flipped. Jackson wanted to see me. Part of me wanted to ignore the message, to avoid the inevitable conversation where he would tell me to stay away from him. But I couldn't disobey a direct mats from an alpha, especially not him. I gathered my belongings and headed to the north entrance, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. Jackson stood there waiting, leaning against one of the stone pillars. When he saw me approaching, his expression remained unreadable. Walk with me, he said simply, and started moving toward the campus gardens. I fell into step beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. We walked in silence for a few minutes, passing under trees that formed a canopy overhead. The gardens were nearly empty at this hour. Stefan came to see me this morning, Jackson finally said. He wanted to know if I was the one who gave you that phone. My blood ran cold. What did you tell him? I told him it was none of his business. Jackson stopped walking and turned to face me. Aiden, I need you to understand something. Stefan is threatened by you. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Threatened by me? I'm nobody. He's popular, strong, from a good family. Exactly, Jackson interrupted. He has everything handed to him. You have nothing, yet you keep going. You work part-time, maintain your grades, and never complain. That kind of strength terrifies bullies like him because it's real strength, not borrowed from family names or physical dominance. I didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever described me as strong before. I gave you that phone because I wanted you to be safe. Jackson continued. What happened to it isn't your fault. Stefan is responsible for his own actions, but it was expensive and I couldn't protect it. Things can be replaced, Aiden. You can't. His eyes held mine with an intensity that made my knees weak. I don't want you thinking you owe me anything or that you failed somehow. You did. We started walking again, this time in more comfortable silence. As we reached the edge of the gardens, Jackson paused once more. Tomorrow, keep your old phone charged. If Stefan or Garrett bothers you again, call me immediately. Promise me. I promise, I whispered, meaning it. He reached out and briefly touched my shoulder, just a simple gesture, but it sent warmth flooding through me. Good. Now get home safely. Text me when you arrive. I nodded and headed toward the bus stop, my mind spinning. Jackson Cross cared about my safety. He had defended me to Stefan. He had called me strong. None of this made sense, yet I couldn't deny the hope blooming in my chest. On the bus ride home, I replayed our conversation repeatedly. For the first time since the parking lot incident, I felt something other than shame and fear. I felt seen, valued, maybe even protected. When I reached my apartment, I sent Jackson a simple message. Home safe. Thank you. His reply came within seconds. Good. Sleep well, Aiden. I went to bed that night with a small smile on my face. The first genuine one in days. Friday morning arrived and I desperately wanted to stay in bed. My mind and body felt exhausted from the week's events. However, I had no choice. My scholarship depended on maintaining perfect attendance. From the moment I stepped onto campus, Stefan and Garrett watched me like predators stalking prey. They said nothing, which somehow felt more menacing than their usual taunts. Chemistry lab began normally enough. Professor Davidson explained our experiment for the day, a delicate chemical mixture that required careful handling and precise measurements. Safety goggles and gloves were mandatory. Garrett and his group set up their workspace directly beside mine. I avoided eye contact and focused intently on measuring my compounds, double-checking every step. The lab hummed with quiet concentration. Students measured liquids, adjusted Bunsen burners, and scribbled observations in their notebooks. I had just added my third chemical component when I heard it. A sharp popping sound from Garrett's station. Then the explosion hit. The blast wasn't massive, but in the confined lab space, it felt enormous. Smoke billowed instantly and screaming erupted from multiple directions. My ears rang from the concussive force, and everything became a disorienting blur of gray smoke and panicked voices. Chemical smell filled my nostrils, acrid and burning. When the smoke began clearing, the scene that emerged made my stomach drop. Garrett lay on the floor, his right hand severely burned. The skin had turned an angry red, already blistering in places. He was screaming raw, agonized sounds that cut through the chaos. His carefully constructed alpha bravado had completely shattered, leaving only a terrified young man in terrible pain. Professor Davidson rushed over, his face pale with shock. Students backed away from Garrett, some crying, others frozen in horror. Stefan pushed through the crowd and dropped to his knees beside his friend, but fear had drained all color from his face. He looked utterly lost. "Someone call an ambulance," Professor Davidson shouted, fumbling for the emergency phone mounted on the lab wall. He grabbed it, pressed it to his ear, then cursed loudly. "The line is dead. Does anyone have signal?" Students pulled out their phones, but head shakes rippled through the group. The thick concrete walls of the old science building created notorious dead zones. In a normal situation, the landline would work, but today of all days it had failed us. My heart pounded against my ribcage. Garrett had tormented me for months. He had destroyed the new phone Jackson gave me. He had humiliated me repeatedly, laughed at my struggles, made me feel worthless. Every logical part of my brain said he deserved this, that karma had finally caught up with him. But watching him writhe in agony on that floor, I couldn't maintain that hardness. He was dying, or at least he could die if we didn't get help fast. Burns could lead to shock, infection, or worse. And despite everything he had done to me, I couldn't just stand there and let that happen. My hands shook as I pulled out my old cracked phone. The screen was barely functional, held together more by hope than structure, but miraculously it still worked. I dialed 911 with trembling fingers. "Emergency services, what is your emergency?" The operator's calm voice was a lifeline. "There's been an explosion at Greenwood University Chemistry Lab. Building C, 3rd floor. A student is seriously injured with severe burns on his right hand and arm. We need an ambulance immediately." I rattled off the specific location, the nearest entrance, the fastest route from the main gate. "Help is on the way. Stay on the line with me." "Is the patient conscious?" "Yes, he's conscious and in severe pain." I kept my voice as steady as possible, though my whole body trembled. "Good. Keep him calm if you can. Try to prevent him from touching the burned area. Paramedics will arrive in approximately 8 minutes. I ended the call and moved toward Garrett without thinking. Stefan stared at me with an expression I had never seen on his face, complete disbelief mixed with something that might have been shame. "You called for help? For Garrett?" His voice cracked slightly. He genuinely couldn't comprehend why I would help someone who had caused me so much pain. I didn't respond with words. Instead, I shrugged off my jacket and carefully draped it over Garrett's burned arm, protecting it from air exposure and potential contaminants. Professor Davidson brought over a container of cool water, and together we did our best to provide first aid without causing additional damage. "It hurts," Garrett gasped between labored breaths. Tears streamed down his face. "It hurts so much." "I know," I said quietly. "Help is coming. Just try to breathe slowly. In and out. Focus on your breathing." Garrett's eyes met mine, and in that moment I saw genuine fear and confusion. He didn't understand why I was helping him either. Maybe he had convinced himself that I was weak, pathetic, someone who would celebrate his suffering. Discovering he was wrong seemed to hurt almost as much as the burns. The 8 minutes felt like hours. I stayed beside Garrett, talking to him in low tones to keep him conscious and as calm as possible. Stefan remained there too, uncharacteristically silent, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Finally, we heard sirens approaching. Paramedics rushed into the lab with their equipment, professional and efficient. They assessed Garrett quickly, started an IV line, administered pain medication, and carefully dressed his burns with specialized materials. "Who made the emergency call?" one paramedic asked while they worked. "I did," I said quietly. "Quick thinking. Your fast action probably saved his hand." Severe burns like this need immediate professional care. The paramedic nodded approvingly at me before returning attention to Garrett. They loaded Garrett onto a stretcher and wheeled him out. By then, word had spread throughout campus. Students crowded the hallway outside the lab, craning their necks to see what had happened. Whispers rippled through the crowd when they saw me emerge. The same Omega they had ignored or mocked for months. The one who had just saved his worst bully's life. Professor Davidson pulled me aside. Aiden, you showed remarkable courage and compassion today. I'm going to make sure the administration knows what you did. I just nodded, too emotionally exhausted to form words. As I walked through the parting crowd of students, their stares felt different than before. Not mocking or dismissive, but something closer to respect, maybe even awe. And there, standing near the building entrance, was Jackson Cross. His eyes locked onto mine across the distance. The expression on his face made my breath catch, pride, respect, and something deeper that I didn't dare name. He gave me a small, meaningful nod, and my heart skipped several beats. I had spent months trying to be invisible, trying not to make waves, accepting that I would always be the weak Omega everyone overlooked. But today, I had acted when it mattered. I had been brave when it counted. And for the first time in my life, I felt like maybe I was worth something after all. The rest of that day passed in a strange haze. News of the incident spread rapidly. Students I had never spoken to stopped me in hallways to ask if I was all right, to tell me what I did was amazing. It felt surreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life. That evening, as I sat in my small apartment, my phone buzzed with a message from Jackson. What you did today defines who you are. I hope you're beginning to see what I've seen all along. I read those words over and over, letting them sink into the parts of me that had felt worthless for so long. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was finally beginning to see myself differently. Saturday morning brought an unexpected message from the principal's office, requesting my presence first thing Monday morning. My entire weekend dissolved into anxious speculation. Had they decided to blame me for the explosion somehow? Was I in serious trouble? The uncertainty gnawed at me constantly. When Monday arrived, the campus atmosphere had transformed completely. Students stared at me as I walked through the main gates, but their expressions held none of the usual mockery or dismissal. Several people smiled genuinely. A group of freshmen actually moved aside respectfully as I passed. Junior students I had never met nodded in acknowledgement. The shift felt so dramatic I wondered if I had accidentally wandered into an alternate reality. Stefan and his usual crowd now kept their distance. When our eyes met briefly across the courtyard, I saw no trace of his former superiority. Instead, something resembling guilt shadowed his features, or perhaps the dawning realization that he had targeted the wrong person all along. Outside the principal's office, my heart hammered against my ribs. I knocked twice, heard a muffled response, and pushed the door open. But Principal Morrison wasn't alone. Jackson Cross stood near the window, and beside him stood an impeccably dressed man in a formal suit who radiated professional authority. "Aiden, please sit down," Principal Morrison said, and for the first time ever his voice carried respect rather than the usual administrative detachment. "This is Mr. Anderson, Jackson's personal lawyer and family advisor." Confusion multiplied exponentially. A lawyer? Why would Jackson's lawyer need to meet with me? I sank into the offered chair, looking between the three men for some explanation. Jackson stepped forward, and when he looked at me, his usual carefully controlled expression had softened into something vulnerable and honest. "Aiden, what you did Friday in that chemistry lab was extraordinarily brave. Garrett had bullied you relentlessly, destroyed your belongings, humiliated you publicly. Yet when his life hung in the balance, you acted without hesitation to save him. That reveals your true character." I couldn't find words. The intensity of his gaze, the weight of this unexpected meeting, everything felt overwhelming. "I need to be honest with you," Jackson continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I had never heard from him before. I've been watching you for weeks now, since that first day Stefan toward your phone in the cafeteria. I've watched how you handle adversity with grace. I've seen your patience, your quiet strength, your refusal to become bitter despite how others treat you. And Aiden, you've changed something fundamental in me." My breathing had become shallow. What was he saying? Principal Morrison smiled gently, a grandfatherly expression that seemed completely out of character for him. Jackson came to me several weeks ago requesting that we ensure your safety on campus. He was the one who arranged for the new phone to be placed in your locker. He's been watching out for you though you didn't know it. I don't understand, I whispered. Why would you do all that for someone like me? Jackson moved closer and Mr. Anderson discreetly stepped toward the window, giving us a semblance of privacy despite the small office. Because you're not someone like you, Aden. You're rare in ways that have nothing to do with status or wealth or family connections. You possess genuine kindness, real courage, authentic strength, qualities that can't be bought or faked. He took a deep breath and I noticed his hands trembling slightly. This powerful alpha who everyone feared and respected was nervous. I've made an important decision, Jackson said quietly. I want you in my life, Aden. Under my protection, yes, but more than that. I want you as my mate, officially and permanently. The words hit me like a physical force. Jackson Cross, the alpha everyone desired, the man who could have literally anyone was asking me to be his mate. Me, the scholarship student with the broken phone who couldn't even defend himself from basic bullies. That's impossible. I heard myself say. I'm just an omega, the one everyone mocks, the one with nothing to offer someone like you. We exist in completely different worlds. Jackson reached out and took my hand. His touch sent warmth flooding through me. But unlike other alpha touches I had experienced, this one felt safe, comforting. Your worth has nothing to do with material possessions, Aden. It comes from your heart, your character, your soul. And those things are more precious than any wealth or status. You are exactly what I've been searching for my entire life. Someone genuine. Someone kind despite having every reason to be bitter. Someone who chooses compassion even when it costs them. That's real strength. That's what I want beside me. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. Happy tears, shocked tears, tears of relief and disbelief all mixed together. Nobody had ever valued me this way. Nobody had ever seen me as anything other than weak, forgettable, worthless. I know this is sudden, Jackson continued softly. I'm not asking you to decide this instant. Take whatever time you need. But I wanted you to know my intentions, to understand that everything I've done comes from a genuine place. You deserve honesty and respect, and I intend to give you both. Mr. Anderson cleared his throat gently. If you accept Jackson's proposal, I'll handle all the legal documentation to ensure you're protected in every way possible. This isn't a casual arrangement. Jackson is offering you a permanent bond with all the legal and social protections that entails. We'll also ensure your scholarship continues uninterrupted, Principal Morrison added. And should you choose to accept, you'll have the full support of this institution. What you did Friday demonstrated the kind of character we hope to nurture in all our students. I looked at Jackson through my tears, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not as the untouchable alpha on a pedestal, but as someone who had chosen me deliberately, thoughtfully, genuinely. Someone who saw value in me that I had never seen in myself. I need time to process this, I managed to say, my voice shaking. It's so much to take in. Of course, Jackson said immediately. Take all the time you need. But know this, Aden, my feelings won't change. Whether you need a day, a week, or a month, I'll be waiting. You're worth waiting for. The meeting concluded shortly after. As I walked back across campus, everything looked different. The buildings, the trees, even the sky seemed brighter somehow. Students still stared, but now I understood I was no longer invisible. I had become visible in the best possible way. That evening, I sat in my tiny apartment and really thought about Jackson's proposal. Could I accept? Could someone like me really fit into his world? But then I remembered his words, that my worth came from within, not from external circumstances. Maybe it was time to start believing that myself. I picked up my phone and typed a message. I'd like to talk more. When are you free? His response came within seconds. For you? Always. Tomorrow after your last class. I'll be waiting. I fell asleep that night with a strange feeling in my chest. Hope. The following months unfolded like scenes from a dream I was afraid to wake from. Jackson invited me to move into his penthouse apartment, and after much internal debate, I accepted. The transition terrified me initially. His home occupied the entire top floor of the city's most exclusive building, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire downtown area. My previous apartment could have fit into his living room 3 times over. But Jackson demonstrated infinite patience during my adjustment period. He never pushed, never rushed me, never made me feel inadequate for my hesitations. He gave me my own bedroom, though he made it clear he hoped I would eventually want to share his. He respected my boundaries while making his intentions unmistakably clear. Gradually, naturally, I became part of his world. But what surprised me most was how he adapted to become part of mine as well. He attended my study groups, helped me prepare for exams despite having graduated the previous year, and genuinely listened when I talked about my interests in literature and social psychology. He protected me without smothering me, supported me without controlling me, and loved me without trying to change me. At university, everything had shifted. The transformation wasn't just about how others treated me, though that had certainly changed. Students who had ignored me for months now greeted me warmly. Professors called on me in class and actually listened to my answers. But more importantly, something had transformed within me. I walked with my head up. I participated in discussions. I stopped apologizing for existing. 3 weeks after the chemistry lab incidents, Stefan and Garrett approached me in the cafeteria. The entire room fell silent, watching to see what would happen. Stefan looked uncomfortable, almost vulnerable, an expression I had never imagined seeing on his face. "Adam, can we talk to you?" Stefan asked quietly. "Privately." Then Jackson, sitting beside me, tensed slightly, but I placed my hand on his arm. "It's fine," I assured him. To Stefan I nodded. "Okay." We moved to a quiet corner of the cafeteria. Garrett stood there with his right arm still bandaged, though he had regained most of its function. When he looked at me, his eyes held something I had never seen there before: genuine remorse. "I've been wanting to say this since the hospital," Garrett began, his voice rough with emotion. "What you did that day, I can't explain how much it meant. The doctor said if help had arrived even 10 minutes later, I might have lost my hand entirely. You saved me, Abe. After everything I did to you, all the horrible ways I treated you, you still saved me." He paused, clearly struggling with his emotions. "I was raised believing omegas were weak, that they needed alphas to protect them, that they existed below us somehow. My father taught me those things, and I never questioned them. But you proved every single one of those beliefs wrong. You're stronger than I'll ever be. Not physically, but where it actually matters: in character, in courage, in basic human decency." Stefan stepped forward, and I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "I was the worst to you, Aiden. I targeted you because you were quiet, because you didn't fight back, because it was easy. That's the truth, and it's shameful. I convinced myself you were weak, but really I was the weak one. You endured months of abuse and never became cruel or bitter. When tested, you chose kindness. I would have failed that test completely." "We don't deserve your forgiveness," Garrett said. "We know that. But we wanted you to know that we're truly deeply sorry, and we're trying to be better people because of what you showed us." I looked at both of them, these alphas who had made my life miserable, who had destroyed my belongings and my confidence, who had made me dread coming to campus each day. Part of me wanted to hold on to that anger, to make them suffer as they had made me suffer. But Jackson had taught me something important over these weeks. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing their behavior or forgetting what happened. Forgiveness was about refusing to let their past actions poison my future. It was about choosing freedom over resentment. "I forgive you," I said quietly. "Not because what you did was okay, it wasn't. But because holding on to hatred would only hurt me in the long run. You've apologized sincerely and you seem committed to changing. That's all anyone can ask." Both of them looked stunned, then profoundly relieved. Stefan extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I shook it. Garrett did the same with his uninjured left hand. As we returned to the main cafeteria area, I noticed the room had been watching our interaction. When they saw us shake hands, spontaneous applause broke out. It felt surreal and slightly embarrassing, but also validating in a way I hadn't expected. Jackson stood as I approached, and without hesitation he took my hand in his. We had been growing closer steadily, and 2 weeks ago I had finally moved into his bedroom, accepting fully what we were to each other. The bond between us grew stronger each day, built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and increasingly deep love. Today, walking through campus with my hand in his, I felt something I had never experienced before. I felt like I belonged. Not because of Jackson's status or wealth, but because I had finally learned my own worth. Several weeks later, Jackson and I were driving home from campus when he pulled over unexpectedly. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out something that made my breath catch: my old broken phone. "You kept this?" I asked in amazement. "Of course I kept it," he said with that rare, genuine smile he reserved only for me. "This phone represents everything I love about you, Aden." It was broken, damaged, held together by sheer determination. Everyone saw it as worthless, something to mock and discard. But it kept working when it mattered most. It saved Garrett's life. He turned the phone over in his hands gently. "You were like this phone, underestimated, overlooked, damaged by how others treated you. But you never stopped functioning. You never gave up. And when the critical moment arrived, you proved your true value. This phone is a reminder that worth isn't determined by appearance or status or what others think. Worth comes from what's inside." Tears filled my eyes, but this time they were purely tears of joy. "You see me in ways I never saw myself." "I see the truth," he corrected gently. "I see who you really are, who you've always been. I just had to wait for you to see it too." He pulled me close and I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. For the first time in my entire life, I felt completely safe, completely valued, completely loved. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing me, for choosing me, for teaching me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. Thank you for letting me love you," he replied softly, "for being brave enough to accept what you deserve. You've changed my life completely, Aden. You've shown me what real strength looks like." We sat there in comfortable silence, holding each other, the broken phone resting on the dashboard like a trophy. That damaged device had taught me life's most valuable lesson, that external appearance means nothing compared to internal worth. Society might judge based on surfaces, but true value runs much deeper. The omega everyone mocked had become the person everyone respected. The boy with the broken phone had found someone who saw past the cracks to the treasure within. And most importantly, I had finally learned to see my own worth, independent of anyone else's opinion. My journey hadn't been easy. The scars from months of bullying would take time to fully heal. But with Jackson beside me, with newfound confidence growing daily, and with the knowledge that I had faced my worst fears and emerged stronger, I knew I could handle whatever came next. We drove home together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. My old life felt like a distant memory. This new beginning, built on genuine love and mutual respect, was everything I had never dared to dream possible. And it all started with a broken phone and an alpha who saw beyond the cracks.